Hello everyone, I Bhavna Chitlangya on behalf of Guru KPO welcome you all. My topic for today's discussion is barriers to communication. What is communication? Communication is the process of transferring knowledge, information or idea from one person to another or a group of people. Howsoever sound a communication system of an organization, unfortunately, communication barriers always exist. Let's discuss the barriers to communication today. The first barrier to communication is physical barriers. Physical barriers are those barriers which are already present in the environment. Some of them are controllable by the management, whereas some are not. The first one being noise. Noise, as we experience in our day-to-day life, that noise acts as a barrier while we communicate with others. Likewise, in an organization also, for example, in a factory premises, when two people want to communicate, noise acts as a barrier because of the noise of the machinery. The second is time and distance. When two people want to communicate, if the receiver for the communication does not have time to listen to the communicator, then it acts as a barrier. Or there is too much distance between person A and person B, again then distance acts as a barrier to communication. The third one being defects in the medium of communication. For example, two people are communicating over a telephone line and there is some disturbance in the telephone. Then the receiver would not be able to get the proper message of the sender. It acts as a barrier to communication. Next is psychological barriers. Psychological barriers are attitude, emotions, sentiments, moods of people. The first one being emotions. Emotions plays a very important role on how we perceive a message. For example, the same message will be interpreted in different manner when we are angry or when we are in a calm and composed mood, as we see in our day-to-day life. The second is lack of self-confidence. When there is distrust between the sender and the receiver of communication, then the sender of the communication lacks confidence in delivering his message. Laziness also acts as a barrier to communication. How? In an organization, sometimes the managers feel that the message must have already been passed or spread. In that case, they do not take the action to formally pass the message. That accounts for laziness, which acts as a barrier to communication. Selective perception. We all perceive only that part of information which is of our interest. For example, depending on our past experiences or our background, we will interpret only the part of the message which is of our interest. That again acts as a barrier to communication. Semantic barriers. Semantic barriers are also known as language barriers to communication. The first one being lack of common language. When two people communicating with each other do not know a single common language, then the message will not be passed properly or as intended by the sender of the message. For example, an English-speaking boss and a Telugu-speaking employee will not be able to communicate with each other unless they have a common language in between. Second is poor vocabulary. Poor vocabulary. For example, when we use sentences, we have to use certain words. If we fumble or cannot use the right words at the right time, then we will not be able to format a message and deliver it. Again, acts as a barrier to communication. The next is poor knowledge of grammar and punctuation. Only good vocabulary is not enough for communicating. We also need to use the vocabulary in the sentences with proper grammar and punctuation. If that is used, then there will be no barrier to communication when we are drafting a message. Personal barriers. Yet another barriers to communication. First one being personal attitude. When a person who is delivering the message is himself not comfortable with the message, then he will not be able to deliver it properly, and which will not be understood by the person who is receiving the message. That is personal attitude, which acts as a barrier to communication. The next one is lack of confidence in subordinates. In an organization, when the superior-subordinate relationship are not proper or the superiors do not have faith or trust in the subordinates, then the subordinates lack confidence in giving the message properly to the superiors. Again, it acts as a barrier to communication. The third one being message overload. When a person in an organization has several messages in his mind going on, then he is overloaded with messages. He will not be able to give proper communication to anyone with that overload. That again acts as a barrier to communication. communication. Next is organizational barriers, the barriers which exist in the organization. The first one is wrong choice of medium. We have several choices of medium in an organization to opt from when we want to communicate it. For example, written communication, oral communication, video communication, or audiovisual communication. If we choose a wrong choice of medium in an organization, then the message will not be delivered as intended by the sender to the receiver. The next is status relationship. Status relationship is the person at a status has the power. If he is not able to communicate properly with the subordinates, then the subordinates will feel scared to report to the superior. That again acts as a barrier to communication. Lengthy process. In an organization, there is a hierarchy through which the communication flows. That is upward communication, downward communication, or diagonal communication. If the hierarchy is too lengthy, then it takes a long time from the communication to reach from the top to bottom or from the bottom to top. It again acts as a barrier to communication. The next one being socio-psychological barriers. This again is a barrier to communication. The first one is inference. Inference is a conclusion that a person draws about another one as per his prior information or as per the past experiences. In an organization, when a manager or a superior already has drawn an inference about a subordinate, then it acts as a barrier to communication. Bad listening. Listening is a very important part of any communication. If a person cannot listen properly to the feedback given by the receiver, then the person cannot communicate well. The next one is negative emotions. Emotions like hatred, greed also act as a barrier to communication. When there is a lot of negativity that is going on in our mind, we will not be able to deliver the communication or the message properly. The last one being inattentiveness. Inattentiveness, as we all know, acts as a barrier to communication. For example, students sitting in the class also, if they are inattentive to what the teacher has to say, then they will not understand the concept that the teacher is explaining. Hence, inattentiveness also acts as a barrier to communication. So this was all about barriers to communication. For more details, kindly visit www.gurukpo.com. Thank you.